Hey guys, in this video I'm just going to go over a little bit of basic D2 stuff if you've never played the game. This might be helpful. So basically you don't want to play melee. The only exception is Smite on the Paladin, so avoid Barbarian altogether in my opinion. Probably wouldn't play a Boazon either, or like a Kick Assassin or something like that. Typically you want to use like some kind of leveling build. You can respec later, so you want to dump a bunch of points into whatever skill you're leveling with, so like Poison, Javelin on the Amazon. Wake of Fire on the Assassin is really good. I mean, just the Raised Skeleton build is already really good on the Necromancer. Holy Fire on the Paladin, really good through normal mode. Lightning, Charge Bolt on the Sorceress, really good. And Firestorm on the Druids, really good. And then, you know, when you get to like level 30, you can respec like, say, Hurricane Tornado type stuff, or Frozen Orb Blizzard, Blessed Hammer, you get that level 18 on the Paladin. Bone Spear, Corpse Explosion, really good skills on the Necromancer. Light Death Sentry, really good on the Assassin. And then Lightning Fury for the Amazon, Javazon stuff. But basically just avoid attack base like melee build. The only exception, like I say, is the Smite build. But it has pretty bad kind of AoE clear. It's a single target skill. So because you're going to be playing a caster, you're going to be using a lot of mana, and it's going to be tempting to put a bunch of points into energy because you're going to have like no mana pool at the start of the game while you're trying to cast a ton of spells. It's alright to put a couple points into energy, like maybe 1 or 2 levels worth, but typically the solution is really just to buy a bunch of mana pots, a ridiculous amount. So as you start off, you're going to have 4 potions available to put in your belt and hotkey and chug away. As you get better and better belts, you're going to unlock more slots, and then you're going to be coming to the vendors a lot, and shift and right click will fill up all the corresponding potions. And then I can do it for the healing potions. And then one nice trick whenever you're restocking on pots, because you're going to be blasting a ton of them, is to pick up your belt and all the because you don't have your slots anymore. They're going to go into your inventory, and if they can't fit in your inventory, they'll drop to the ground. Then you can pick them up that way. Then you can put your belt back on it and do it again. Shift right click, as you can see. And then as you're playing through the game, and then you're out there killing monsters, and you can shift left click to put these potions into the corresponding slots. And then eventually, when you run out of potions, you'll come back to town and fill up again with the shift right click and picking up your belt method. Saves you a lot of time. It's pretty much the most efficient way to play the game early. But these potions do cost a lot of gold. And the best way to get gold is to typically pick up stuff that you find. Especially wands, scepters, and staves. Specifically ones with a lot of plus skills will vendor for a lot of gold, like this. If you found this on the ground, this would vendor for the max vendor price, which 35,000 gold. And then armor pieces, like body armor specifically, typically vendor for a lot of gold, especially when you get into Nightmare and Hell difficulty. All armor slots for like Nightmare and Hell mode specific bases do vendor for a ton of gold as well. You also vendor things like useless rings or amulets that you find, or charms. And then while gems are useful, it's alright to vendor gems, as they do vendor for a lot relative to where you are in the game. Especially when you get to like flawless gems, they do vendor for a lot if you're really desperate for gold. You're really lacking, which is a lot of your gold typically goes to pots, and then some of your mercenary reviving if you're running a merc. But that's pretty much mana and potions. Resistances, you do want to ideally cap your resistances, and when you get to Nightmare and Hell difficulty, you will lose resistances all the way across the board. But typically Fire and Lightning are the most important. When you get to like Act 3, Act 4 in normal mode, you want to get Fire and Lightning as high as you can. It doesn't have to be capped through normal mode, but typically Fire and Lightning, most important. Cold, a fair bit less important, I would say, and then Poison the least important. There's not that many things that do raw poison damage in the game. It's typically just an annoying damage over time, but you can always come to town, and you can drink thawing potions and antidotes, which increase your cold res for a bit, and antidotes increase your poison res for a bit. Very good for like Andariel in Act 1. Drink some antidote potions. You can also give them to your mercenary. You need to like Act 3, Act 4, you're going to be needing some Fire Lightning res, and then, you know, later Act 5, you probably want some cold res, especially when you get into Nightmare mode, but it can be hard to get some extra resistances, especially really early. So like, if you're needing like Fire res, maybe a Row Rune into like a helmet or a shield is a good option. Like a 2-socket helmet's pretty good, just like a Row or if you have an Ort as well for lightning res. Also, shields can work early. If you have like a 3-socket shield, you can throw in like some topazes for lightning res or some rubies for fire res. Another option is maybe you have like no stat gloves, or you have like a no stat belt or no stat boots. It's alright to go to like Act 2 or Act 4. Specifically, those acts are pretty good to check for vendors. You just kind of skim through and see if there's any like resistance gear for slots that maybe can fill that for you. And then you can just leave town, come back into town, and the vendors will reset if you don't see anything you want. Then you like skim through gear again. As you can see, some of this stuff does have a little bit of resist. You get like 20, 30 resistances pretty early on in the game from the vendor, but that's a decent way to try and get some resistances until you can start, you know, getting some of the better gear in the game. When you get to Act 5, the second quest gives you a Rao or a Tau rune. And this makes a rune word, so if you put this in, say, like this is, for example, a 3-socket shield, which I bought from the vendor in Act 2, you just put it specifically in this order. If you don't do the correct order, you're not going to get the rune word and all the bonuses, so Rao or Tau in that order, and you get like a huge all-resist shield. This is typically, everybody pretty much uses this on their first character. So when you get to Nightmare and Hell mode and you're playing through the game, you're going to notice, especially in Hell mode, you'll start seeing it in Nightmare mode, but mobs that are immune to damage type. So these mobs here are immune to poison, these mobs here are immune to fire, and I am a cold build, so if I run the cold immunes, I actually can't do damage to them. The ways to do this, get around this, is typically you just skip them or you let your mercenary kill them. That's kind of the newbie way. Before you have like crazy good gear, and there's like crazy gear that lets you bypass it, help break immunities and stuff like that, but you can go like a dual spec, which is going to nerf your primary spec. So like I could cast Blizzard, and I could also cast like Meteor later on in the game. Don't really recommend playing that way, but if it's too annoying to deal with immunities, you can definitely play that way, and it's totally fine to do that. But typically I just like to play one spec, and that's going to kind of dictate where you're going to typically be farming in the game. So for this cold sort, for example, Ancient Tunnels is a great place where there's no base cold immunes, and it's possible to run the cold immunes in here from the rare mobs and stuff, but typically you're not going to be running into them. So depending on your damage type is going to kind of dictate where you're going to be typically farming. But probably the most forgiving of builds for immunities is the Hammerden from the Paladin, as it does pure magic damage, and there's hardly anything in the game that's actually immune to pure magic damage. Which is actually, this zone does have the zombies, which are immune, funny enough, but there's only a very small handful of mobs in the entire game that are immune to pure magic damage. So Hammerden definitely recommended, very highly recommended for a new player. Else, you're going to mostly be just restricted to farming whatever zones are friendly for your damage type. That's just kind of how the game works. One of the most important stats for progressing your character is to, you know, if you want to find items in Diablo 2, is to get the magic find stat. So, as you can see in Topazes, the top tier of this is 24% increase, better chance of finding magic items, and this basically makes you get way more rare items, way more unique items, and way more set items. It does have diminishing returns, but until you're into like 300+% range, it's pretty much always worth it to get more magic find. The difference between like say 0 and 300% magic find is it's night and day difference, the amount of uniques and sets you'll see. So it's great to invest into magic find. I would say typically around Nightmare mode, try to get at least a little bit going. Maybe it's 2 topazes in your helm, you know, 2 or 3 topazes in your helm or whatever. Maybe find a piece of gear with nice magic find, or maybe some rings with magic find. Pretty much every slot has the ability to get magic find on it. And when you're playing through the game, having magic find is going to greatly increase the amount of, you know, nice items that you find. As far as magic finding specifically goes, there's a bunch of specific spots. For example, like popular one is Mephisto, while Teleport Sork is extremely good for this. It's still decent for a character just to run through and kill Mephisto, as you can see. This character has like over 300 magic find, and it's pretty much guaranteed he'll drop multiple sets or unique items per kill. As you can see, I got a set and a unique item here. And I would just do this repeatedly, but like I said, most ways to improve character gear is a repeated method over and over again, whether it be like, you know, maybe you run the Chaos Sanctuary multiple times, or maybe you run a specific just like area multiple times, or like a Mephisto or a Bell run or something like that, or cows. There's a bunch of different places. That's pretty much it. Hopefully some of this information was useful if you're unfamiliar with Diablo 2. That's about it. Cool.